Welcome to Conversations with Alan Benson. I am your host. Please join me in welcoming a very special guest, Dr. Eddie Woods, as we discuss youth, urban America, and gun violence. Welcome, Dr. Woods. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. How are you, Alan?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's really honor to share this platform with you as we discuss something as what I was saying earlier, the elephant in the room, because it is affecting not only the Louisville community, but also across the nation.
Right.
So, one thing, let's just go ahead and get it started. And I'd like to say or ask, what is your current role and why did you choose this profession, Eddie?
Well, I think in some respects it chose me. I'm the CEO of No More Red Dots Incorporated. We do gun violence intervention work, and I had worked for a lot of years doing alcohol and other drug prevention. And folks that we were training and we were doing presentations with just started to ask more questions about youth violence and gangs and those kinds of things. And of course, I wasn't able to really answer those questions, even though I'd always had an affinity for organized crime and gangs and so forth. So, but because you're on somebody else's clock, you got to do what the agenda calls for. So we couldn't really
Mhm.
answer it. So one of my supervisors told me that I couldn't be supervised and that I needed to start my own company. So, okay, good advice. And we've been doing that ever since. That was in the early '90s.
Okay. Okay, great. So you couldn't be supervised. Okay. So,
Yeah, yeah,
hey,
yeah.
you were a leader within your own right. That's how I
Well,
look
that's I should have told him, man. That's a good way to look at it.
at it. I hear you. So, with that, as we were talking earlier, you told me that you grew up here in Louisville, but
Right.
how would you describe your life growing up?
I think it was kind of typical. We had a community that kind of looked out for each other. I grew up in the California area of Louisville, over on 15th and Hale. And,
Mm-hmm.
there was certain things you couldn't do. It seemed like the police knew everybody in the neighborhood and all of that, and we kind of all looked out for each other. If you did something in the eyesight of other parents, they was going to let your folks know before you even got home. So but
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of typical in that respect. But there were a lot of things around us that our parents didn't want us anywhere close to. But I was always attracted to those things. You know,
Mm-hmm.
people who came out after dark and all of that. Even though I had to be in before the street lights came on. So but it was pretty typical.
Okay, awesome. So, what path did you travel just educationally to help you get to where you are today, and what really
Yeah,
inspired you as to your calling and what you're doing?
I think in large part, a lot of it was just kind of you, you being the kind of person that you are, the kind of personality that you are. I really didn't know anything about college, and the only reason I went to college is because most of my friends were going.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent a letter to Eastern Kentucky University. They sent me some paperwork that I needed to have filled out. My dad wasn't really interested, so I filled the paperwork out. Households where education was not a real heavy pursuit, So when I went to him and told him that I wanted to go to college, he said, "Fine, I'll see you." And I told him I needed some money, so he gave me $75, a deck of cards, and a pair of dice, and said he'd talk to me when stay out of trouble. So I
Mm-hmm.
went to Eastern Kentucky University, and um, I don't know, somehow I stayed there.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a while to get an art degree. I was going to be an artist. I was going to paint pictures and change the world through my paintings.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't quite work out that way. But I remember the first term paper I ever did at EKU was on organized crime, and it seems like it just that stayed an interest of mine throughout school and University of Louisville and LaSalle University. It just kind of stayed an interest, you know.
Yeah.
And
It's interesting you brought up the organized crime, but I look at different documentaries, and and I say it's interesting because a lot of the organized crime is connected even within the government agencies and
yeah,
officials and so
yeah,
forth. And it's a big web.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's huge,
operate.
and
So,
and it's not really new. It's been with us for as long as you've had people that like money. You've had organized crime.
oh yeah.
So it's been kind of like that, you know. Um, in working most of the jobs that I had, I worked at Kentucky Correctional Psychiatric Center, KCPC, and I just wasn't. And the inmates kept getting younger, so I wasn't anywhere close to understanding what was going on and why this it seemed to be a thing of younger and younger individuals. So one thing led to another. We had to pretty much change our career path, you know, because I needed to be closer to what was going on and get a feel for it and see how I could help. Um, I don't know. I just had that. I guess I take that part from my mom. She was always helping folks, and when people would come to me and ask for help, it wasn't like normal stuff. It wasn't like, can you help me to get to the groceries, or can you give me a ride to such and such. It was
Hmm.
always something like, can you help me find my son, or can you tell me why my daughter got hurt? You know,
Hmm.
like that. They knew what my interest was. So, and
Oh,
that kind of snowballed into being involved with working in the projects with Kevin Fields and some other folks who had designed some programs.
hmm.
Matter of fact, Kevin had designed a program called Wi-Fi, which was the youth programs of the Housing Authority of Louisville. And he
Hmm.
wanted somebody to execute or administer the program, and he asked me, could I do it? I said, yeah. And we ended up getting an award from HUD for that program. In 2000, we were one of the best practices programs in the country.
Okay, when he was at the Housing Authority.
Yeah, when he was at the Housing Authority.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Kevin, he's doing a lot of great work at LCCC as
Oh, yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
so I've been knowing Kevin for years, and he's definitely a trailblazer within this community.
Right.
So we know in life we all incur some challenges that help mold who we are. And just want to ask, what are some of the challenges you incurred in your walk, and what did you do to overcome them?
I think one of the things early on was the disillusionment about college. You know,
Hmm.
I was told that if you go to college and you're going to be all right, you'll be able to live the American dream and all that kind of stuff like that. So when I came out of college, that wasn't exactly how it was. Well, I wasn't really making a lot of money. I probably made more money in college hustling than I did on a job when I got out of college. So
Hmm.
that was one thing I had to overcome. But the other thing was and this has kind of been prevalent throughout. People just did not and do not understand the magnitude of gun violence
Yeah.
and how this has impacted our young people and it's way more than a breaking news or bulletin at once. You know, it's even while we're on this broadcast, you know, there are folks out there doing what they do. You know,
Mm.
so and it's a process for us. We developed a process years ago for how we even know that there's been a shooting, and then what we do about it. So, and we can get into that at some point.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So you talk about that gun balance and everything, and that's why we're having this discussion because, as mentioned, this is something gun balance is affecting not only the Louisville community, it's affecting a lot of communities across the nation. And
Right.
sadly, it seems like it's getting worse.
Yeah.
So, uh, Eddie, in your observation, how did we get to this point?
I think a lot of it was maybe negligence on our parts. We started letting other entities that didn't have a pulse raise our children. You know, we
Mm,
let TVs, video games, and videos and all of that raise our kids. And then the more we had situations of children raising children, it started to be less parenting being done. You
mm,
didn't really you didn't know how, so you saw a lot of that starting to happen, which means less structure, which means less guidance, accountability, all those kind of things that we wish we had now, and really have to try to do what we do as adults to maintain it. But crime kind of goes in cycles, you know. The numbers and all of that. If you're into the number part of it, tend to go up and down depending on what how bad other parts of crime are. For example, if you've got an increase or increased numbers or rises in your uh, drug dealing and drug use, you're going to have an almost inherent um, increase in shootings and homicides
mm,
because there's an element of control that has to happen in those particular areas of crime. You know, and that I don't think a lot of it is necessarily always bad people. It's a lot of times folks are doing what they need to do to live, to eat, you know, to raise the kids and what have you. So you do the best you can do, and I think sometimes it turns to criminal pursuits. You know, and for me, it was always a thing of how do we how do we how do we change some of the behavior. You know, because we can't arrest our way out of it. It's just not going to
mm.
happen like that. You know, we have to somehow change some of the folks who are part of the mayhem to be part of the solution.
Yes. Yeah, the war on crime definitely didn't work. That was
No,
many years ago.
no.
I was
And
just
there's
thinking,
a whole lot of conversation about that. You know, because
yeah,
for a long time, man. I've been doing this for about 30 something years. It felt like a war on us more so than anything else, and that was always an issue. You know,
oh yeah,
uh,
that it was strategically done, just like even with the epidemic of crack
right, right.
being placed in black neighborhoods, and I look at different documentaries on what goes on in terms of war. I mean, drugs and so forth. But I was just thinking as you were talking, was the level of gun violence at the level even when we was going through the thick of the crack epidemic? Was the level at this level now
It
at
was
that time?
raising then. It was kind of going up then because you can almost pinpoint it to around 2007, 2006, 8, like that. We started having an advent of a whole lot of automatic weapons that started appearing on the streets, particularly in Louisville. What had been club fights or team dance fights turned into shootings. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
slow, subtle process. And from the standpoint of if you're watching it or if you're working within it, you know, you in one homicide leads to a whole string.
Mm-hmm.
Or one kid growing up without an uncle or without a dad who was killed by someone, you know, then they were too young to do anything about it, and they didn't understand why somebody in the family didn't do something about it. When they got a little older, it became a mission almost. They were going to retaliate and get some vengeance for what had happened to the people. So that raised the bar quite a bit, just the mentality. But then there's availability of weapons. You know, throughout the '90s, we started to get a lot more guns that were available um, in the black community.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more, you know, and you didn't have to purchase them from a store or anything like that. You know, we had tracked and traced some instances where individuals were selling guns out of trunks of cars like they had a license to do it.
Oh
If you
yeah.
had the money, regardless of how old you were, you could get a gun.
Oh yeah. Well,
So
one of my boys back in the day, he said, "Man, Alan, man, you need a gun." He said, "Man, we can just go over and Carter Homes or Southwick and
there
get you
you
one, man."
go. There you
That's
go.
what he told me.
That's what he told. He told you pretty much what was going on at that time. That's right. You know,
I was like, "No, I
man.
don't." It's like what I mentioned earlier. No, I don't need it because the hammer would have came down on me by my parents.
Ain't no doubt about it. See, we had folks that wasn't gonna have it. You
Oh
know,
yeah. Oh
man.
yeah.
I remember one time I broke a window at a vacant building, and with my luck, when the window broke, I turned to my right, and there's a police officer who knew my mom. You know, so he pushed me in the car and told me to kind of set up in the back seat on my knees so that folks could see me. I don't know, man. You know, but so I'm up on my knees and he's taking the long route to get to the house. By the time we got By the time we got home, my mom was on the porch with her hand in that apron pocket, man. I'm trying to convince the police to just take me to jail, man. I don't I don't want to deal with what's getting ready to happen in this house, man.
Oh yeah, that's how it was, man. So yeah, so there's a lot of reasons. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why we're at where we are today in terms of gun violence, our youth, and so forth. But what are maybe some of your top reasons as you see uh, why it's like that, and really what really has to happen? Because as I see it, Eddie, this intervention or correction, however we want to look at it, is more than just maybe meeting with people once in a while. It's something
Yeah,
that might you need constant support, constant intervention. Because really, I look at it, part of it or a lot of it might be about really just changing the mentality of people.
a lot of it is that. A lot of it.
Yeah.
So I
So.
mean, we have to adjust how we approach it. We're not gonna, like I mentioned earlier, we're not gonna arrest our way out of it or use criminal processes for that. You know. So, did I give you a chance to finish your question?
No, no, finish, brother.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think Alan, one of the things that's complicated things quite a bit for us is this whole thing around. Uh, we've got similar challenges or similar criminal activity, but it's all magnified by social media. It's raised up to a whole nother level by social media because
Mm-hmm.
you can be who you want to be on behind the keyboard,
It's that
and a lot of
facade.
folks, a lot of folks make threats and all of those kind of things, and particularly young people, you know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I don't know, we've a long time ago got to the point where it takes very little to do what we call disrespecting us. You know, words can be disrespectful in a lot of cases. So those kind of things are making it a lot worse, a lot more difficult. But what we decided to do with No More Red Dots was to basically do intervention through programs. We try to address the behavior and the attitude directly. We
Mm-hmm.
don't think you can give information out in the general public and hope that someone who is doing criminal activity runs into it. So we had to develop a way to identify the individuals who had weapons and are most likely to shoot. So one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that we did was to set up a liaison and somewhat of a rapport with the juvenile court. So they make referrals to us, and we ask for nothing but gun cases. So,
Mm-hmm.
so we ended up getting quite a few of them that way. And then once the reputation started to kind of solidify, folks started to ask us to help with situations involving their families or their neighborhoods and those kind of
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So, and I don't know if if we're down to that point and in terms of what we're talking about. But one of the key things is when you start to look at the attitude and behavior, we have to teach our young people how to be successful in arenas that they aren't normally in. That
Mm-hmm.
they don't they know how to negotiate and navigate a corner or a drug dealing move. They know how to do that. So what we try to do is get them involved in how you turn something you like as a hobby into a career. How do you get to a level of where you understand that everybody has an opinion, and it might, while it might be very different from yours, it might be something that can help you to grow if you pay attention to it. So
Okay.
so through our programs, and we got about 5 or 6 programs that we use to specifically do those kind of things. We use something called cognitive behavior therapy, or cognitive behavior treatment, since we're not clinicians, and we use that. And then we have a strategy called risk reduction. Both of them are similar in as much as we try to get the participant to take a look at what it is that you're doing every day that's keeping you in this arena of violence, that's keeping you in this whole subculture of violence, where you're making decisions and things that can cost you your life or cause you to have to take another life to protect yourself, put your family at risk, all of those kind of things. And we look at it from the standpoint of what domains and what areas they are frequent most of the time.
Okay. So is our youth that's getting involved with gun violence, is it directly connected to money, the economics behind it, or is it connected to games, or what is it? What are some of the reasons they're getting
Yeah,
caught up in? Is I know some of it's family life, a lot of it's
yeah,
family.
yeah.
Uh,
All of those are factors. I think the root causes have to do with poverty and education and all of those things like that. Some more immediate things though are who you're listening to, who where you're getting your guidance from. You know, how you how whether or not you're succeeding in school or in education, and then, which is huge, because if you're not succeeding in school, you tend to do whatever you do to entertain yourself in that arena.
mm-hmm.
So we lose a lot, and we lose quite a few kids to suspension and being expelled from school, because they don't always get an opportunity to keep up with their work while they're out. So that those things are factors, and I think the money thing is, and even the perception that you're going to make a lot of money with criminal activity. Everybody who is dealing dope is not making a ton of money, but
Mm-hmm.
you got the idea that you're going to make a lot of money, and then you need to be able to protect your turf. You need to
Mm-hmm.
be able to have the power, So a quick hit a lot of times might be $100, might be $1,000.
Yeah.
But we used to have an exercise we used to do in our group sessions with our mentees, where we asked them whether or not they wanted $100 or $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And they always took the 10,000 until we
Mm-hmm.
started talking about the possibility of you being able to make, based on the fact that we get paid in this country for what we know, you might very well be able to make $100 every day. So
Mm-hmm.
multiply that by 365 days, and then
Yeah.
multiply that by 15 years. You know, all of a sudden it didn't look so good to get the 10,000 when you were going to be able to do 100 times more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't think like that. So somebody has to introduce that to them, and then I think, you know, as often as we can, we try to get our young people around folks who are successful. They came from some of the same places that they come from.
Mm-hmm.
Who myself, we were broke and didn't even know it, because we had everything we needed when we needed it. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I didn't find out I was broke till I got to college.
Yeah.
And then so I mean, that's just how it is. I can distinctly remember one of my professors putting income rates up on the wall and up on the board. And so I didn't see ours. I didn't see what I knew my family's income to be. So I asked him, I said, man, where would such and such amount be? He couldn't even tell me. He went on and just walked out of the room. So I called home, told my mom we was broke. And she said, you long distance call for that? So of course that limited the number of times I could call home after that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know
that calls.
I know.
My mother told me, don't call me back. Don't come home until so many weeks.
Man, that is like true.
Oh yeah. So back then it was collect calls.
That's right. See,
and they phone out in the hallway.
Now, it was a problem. It was a problem if you call your folks and they kept saying, "Who? Who is this? Who?" That meant they more than likely to rented your room out. So.
Exactly, man. But yeah, so many people, and I know, and I could be wrong. I feel like we might be in an emergency state because of just the frequency of the gun violence that's happening, and some people. Just to be real, some of us like, that's not my problem. I got mine. I live on the other side of town. But my reality is, I think when you're looking at the African-American experience, no matter if you're the president of the company, you probably have somebody in your family that's struggling, whether it's some mental or physical addiction that might need some help. So we talked earlier. Some people feel like, hey, yes, I might be a professional, a doctor, lawyer, or what have you. If I come talk to these kids and what have you, I feel they're not going to listen to me because I don't have that street creed.
Yeah.
Could you talk to me about street creed, and do you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, and there's some truth to that, but how you overcome that, and what is probably more important, is to develop the rapport and the relationship. Once you take the time to do that, and those are time elements. Sometimes you got to sit on people's porches and listen to stuff that you ain't even there to talk about, and it might even boil down to you having to eat some bad chicken or something every once in a while. Everybody can't cook chicken, but anyway,
that's right.
So, but I think to develop the rapport is key. And you got to be about telling the truth. You can't candy coat it, and you can't try to say the things you think that the young person is going to want to hear. Because for one, with you being older than them, and we tell them a lot of times, if nothing else, the reason you should listen to me because I have been your age and you've not been mine. So that means experience. That means some things that we done picked up on that you haven't had a chance to experience yet. So it gets down to a thing of trying to pay attention to what it is that are the needs of the person that you're trying to serve, and not just come into a situation telling them what you think they ought to be doing instead of, okay, let's work on this together. Mm-hmm. You doing this and this and this, and these problems are keeping you in trouble with the courts and the law, and relationship with your folks at home is not good. So you probably got a good reason, but let's try something different. Let's take a look at trying it this way. And those are the kind of conversations that tend to resonate with a lot of our young people. Particularly if you can build some chances for them to have some pretty quick success in other arenas that they wouldn't have been in no other way. We got a lot of our kids, most of the kids that we got in our program are kids that don't get an opportunity to go on field trips because they don't know how to act. So those are the ones we want. We want the ones that most folks are afraid of. But almost everybody that either you or me know and some other people know somebody who needs that level of help, who are right at the cups of making a decision that could be a life and death decision. So a lot of the folks who ask, how can I help? We don't just have a person to be a volunteer. We train them to be a volunteer because this is a
Okay.
whole nother kind of ball game. There are certain kind of things that you got to be, and it's not the in-depth training that you would have as an intervention specialist, but you need to know how to de-escalate a situation. You need to know how to do lower level, at least intervention, and then it don't hurt to know something a little bit about mediation. How to mediate disputes and all of those kind of things, and then how to build a rapport, how to build a relationship with a person who starts out not trusting you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah, it just requires time,
Yeah,
helping the relationship, more importantly, just being real,
that's right.
not be
That's
fake
right.
or what
That's
have you.
right. Now,
Eddie, what is needed most to stop this gun violence, and as well as the change, as what I mentioned earlier, the mentality
right.
of our youth, our people? What do you think?
Unfortunately, it's probably going to be with us for a while. I mean, maybe forever, because it's only escalated from the first guns that were ever invented. But I think one of the things that we can do to lessen the loss of life, is that we got to figure out ways that we can communicate with each other, with service providers, communicating with each other better, and we have to focus in on the attitude and the behavior as opposed to the activity. If we focus in on the activity, then we're chasing gunfire all the time. We need to be focused in on what it is that's causing the person to make the decision to pick up a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
How do we change that dynamic? And I think we've kind of developed a 5-pronged process for folks working together, because we are at an epidemic kind of a state here with this gun violence. I mean, when we were going through COVID, we had two epidemics at the same time. We had the disease, and then the gun violence.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had, and it's weird too, because in 2020, when folks were supposed to be quarantined and all that kind of stuff and indoors and what have you, most of the people that we were dealing with, or that we were interested in, never were indoors. They
Mm-hmm.
like saying now we outside and all of that, but they never were inside in the first place. So it became a thing and as a matter of fact, too, a lot of their targets, individuals who had gang beef or retaliation stuff, they were stationary targets now because they were indoors somewhere. So it's a lot of dynamics that you have to kind of be paying attention to, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
multifaceted kind of issue that changes with the where you focus your energy. We need to be tuned into organizations talking to each other and not chasing the dollars. Not all of a sudden you're an intervention specialist or an interrupter because there are dollars available for that. You know, there are there's a lot of things you can do to help with gun violence, but they have to be done within the arenas that you specialize in, as opposed to trying to become something that you're not, and more getting in the way than you are doing it, and taking risks. Could end up getting yourself hurt. So there's different plans, but if you've been at this thing for a while, you kind of know what works and what don't work. We got 58 young people who are part of our participant list, and
Okay.
all of them we ask for them to be individuals with gun cases, and
Okay.
and, and so of that 58, only one has a new case, and it's not a gun charge; it's a theft charge. We'll take that. But they're improved. We got some that'll be graduating in May, June, and like that, who didn't think graduation was part of their mix. They didn't think that was. But I tell them, if I can graduate, anybody on the planet can graduate. So
Mm-hmm.
and those are the things that kind of resonate with them as well. See, um, if they get a chance to meet a person who has made a life for themselves, a good life for themselves, flipping houses, but didn't do well in school, or if they a person who can write, we got something that we call the Peace Through the Arts program. This is individuals who want to take their hobbies and turn them into careers. So we teach them writing and photography and silk screening, and all of those kind of things. But we teach the business of those things. We don't. We teach them how to read a contract, how to write a contract, and they learn from individuals who are actually making a living in those areas.
I think that's awesome. Also, because speaking of contracts, I was speaking with this young man, just understanding his value, and a lot of our young men want to be rappers, and
Right.
so forth. And I just asked him. I said, I tell you what, man, if I gave you $50,000 for your work or what have you, what do you think about it, man? He said, man, I take it. He said, I can buy this, I can buy that, and this and that. And of course, he mentioned the women and everything. I said, but if I gave you 50,000, what if I make $2 million off of your work? He said, man, we're gonna have to renegotiate that contract. We're gonna have to talk. I said, man, this is what's happening now.
Exactly.
That's why you need to know your worth and understand when you're talking about contract negotiations and so forth. Make sure if you don't understand, have somebody that you trust that does understand. So he listened. I was looking at him. He was thinking about what I told him because I was just trying to help him.
Well, see, you put the numbers in perspective for him. See,
Yeah.
he took the short money for real. Compared to what his skill set could create for somebody else.
Exactly. So I'm like, man, you got to recognize the game. That's
There you go. It ain't that hard.
Yeah, you got to recognize the game. So just moving on, Eddie, I'm part of various organizations, and we have our mentoring programs. And a lot of times we the organizations I've been in the past, the present, sometimes it's like we might gravitate to the good youth or what have you.
Right.
Are we missing the mark? Or like what I was mentioning to you earlier, sometimes we're speaking or we're having the people that's in the choir surrounding us. Are we missing the mark in terms of reaching the unreachable?
Yeah.
If so, what do we need to do?
I think
in terms of a community.
In a lot of cases we are.
Yeah.
And we are, and even down to educating our kids. We tend to not put as much time into the kid that we're afraid of, number one, or the one that's difficult to reach, the one that doesn't seem to quite understand the lesson the way we've laid it out. So I think we're missing the mark. But how we fix that, I think, is to take the time if we got it. If we don't have it, we almost have to make the time to reach an individual or put them in a situation where they're not wasting their time and you're not wasting yours. Because there are places and situations where a person can learn at their pace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one piece that we're missing. I think the other part is, if we as a society, as a culture, we got to stop being afraid of our kids. These are our babies, and a lot of them want to get out of the situations that they're in, but they don't even know where the exit doors are. So in a lot of cases, we got to go get them. We got to go get them and show them something different, and make it not look like we're grabbing them by the hand and taking them somewhere. And there's a certain kind of I guess skill to that, but most of us know how to do it. Most of us came up under it, Our folks knew how to get us to do something and make it look like we thought of it. And that was an old parent trick, and most of us fell into that trap. I can remember going to the church every time the door opened and was kicking and screaming and then got mad one time when the door wasn't open because I'd
Mm,
gotten so conditioned to going, and my mama knew it was going to be like that. You know, I started to have input into what some of the church programming was, so
mm,
that was a valuable place for me. That's the other part. We got to start trying to figure out how we empower our kids to change themselves, to do what's necessary to build a better life on their own. They have to do some stuff that's self-sustaining that helps them to grow. You know,
mm.
and in turn, what we've found out as well, anytime we could get a negative kid who was doing a lot of negative stuff around positive kids who were sure about what they were doing, it tended to change the dynamic a little bit. They wanted, especially if they develop a relationship and they started to like each other, even start to feel like they could learn from each other. You know, I guess years ago they used to call it co-op learning, but you know, I think probably it's about that, but it's some other stuff of just building rapport and relationships.
Yeah, I think learning is something that yes, our children, youth need to embrace, but there are so many different ways of learning.
That's right.
Because, like, one thing, I used to be like the church I attend. A lot of the older trustees, I'm a trustee at my church, these guys were very, I would say, industrious. They knew how to survive, they owned property. And it wasn't all that they had PhDs or anything like that.
Right.
But these guys, they knew how to survive, just like my grandfather. He passed away when I was real young, my father's father, but he could build and wire a house.
Yeah. Yeah.
How many of us can do that? And they had some type of skill set where they could survive in order
That's
to
right.
survive. So I think inside the classroom and outside, our kids, we need to learn how to survive and be industrious so we can live the life we want to live. And sometimes working for somebody else is just not going to get it. You know,
No.
you need to work for yourself. So figure out a way how you can work for yourself, and that's a part of discovering your purpose
That's right.
and learning what you can do with your purpose. So that's one thing that I'm big on because, like, a long time ago, I was talking to this gentleman. He was talking about his kids. I believe he told me they graduated from Ohio State. He said they doing good, but as a father, you always thinking. And he said I taught my kids then to go out and get a job. When, in addition to, I should have been teaching them to go out and create a job.
Create a job. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's something that's a need within our community. So, uh, uh, Eddie, we're coming to a close
Okay.
with what we're doing, our discussion, that is. And uh, do you have any final comments or anything in terms of where we are? Where do you see uh, where you feel we're going?
Yeah.
Um, how can people get involved with No More Red Dots? And anything else that
Yeah.
you would like to share?
Yeah. Well, I think we're headed in the right direction from the standpoint of more folks are becoming aware of the problem of gun violence and what can be done to address it. Folks need to take the time to get involved in programs and pursuits that actually give our young people a chance to make better choices, to take a look at how that's done. The biggest thing is to stop being afraid of our kids. I mean, you don't build relationships from bulletins at once or 6 o'clock news. You just don't do that. You build relationships from if you see something that you're interested in from the standpoint of how you can help a young person to develop or grow. You need to be about doing that. I think the other part too is we shouldn't prejudge our young people before we get a chance to know them, almost any of them. One of the things I've found over the years is that most of our young people have reputations for being beasts in the streets, doing whatever, but they're very mannerly when they're around firm adults who they know have their best interests at heart. You got to be real with them. You got to not tell them things that you can't do, and and really, I think when it's all said and done, don't be shocked by their behavior. You know, I think probably the last thing, one of the things that I learned in doing group sessions, we had young people who talk to you any kind of way. They'll cuss you and all those kind of things like that. And instead of getting mad about them cussing, we would let them know that while that does not bother me, there are arenas that you'll go into where it will stop you dead in your tracks from from anything that you're trying to do with that particular organization is in the way that you have talked to folks. So we do uh, workshops and so forth along that line. And probably the last thing is don't, if you get a chance to volunteer with Big Brothers Big Sister, Boys and Girls Clubs, a lot of church groups, even No More Red Dots, community centers and those kind of things like that, to give young people to be exposed to you, give them a chance to experience you, because especially if you have lived a long life, whether it's successful or not, you've lived it. So there's an experience that a young person can learn from, and that's a lot of how that is.
Okay.
Alan, I appreciate you, man.
Well, I appreciate you. I've been knowing you for years. Got much love and
Yeah.
respect for you, and I just want to thank you for just. I know you have a very busy schedule, and just
Right.
for coming in and just sharing your insight on what's going on and what needs to happen. So, on behalf of this conversation with Alan Benson, I'd like to thank those that attended this conversation, and my hope is that you learned some information, but more importantly, hey, this serves as it serves as something that will make you want to get involved, whether it's mentoring in your church or community center, or within other nonprofit organizations, or even No More Red Dots.
Right.
So again, thank you for participating with Conversations with Alan Benson, and you all have a blessed evening. Take care.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate you, partner.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, you too.